Better look out, look out. 2, 3, 4. Ba da beep ba 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 ba. Dee 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 dee. I ran out of breath. Certainly not out of breasts, folks. Now begins the entertainment portion of the program. So yikes. I didn't get a chance to read any funny books this week. I just now finished the 2 picks of the week for this week. On Sunday, I had to go visit my comic book collection in my mother's garage and pull out a bunch of books so that my creditors will get out of my asshole. May 2025. Fuck you. That was not for any regular viewers. That was for any of my creditors who might be watching. I still have more comics than you motherfuckers. So yeah, I didn't get a chance to read nothing this week. So now my stack's getting all tall again. Not into it. I'm not into tall things. I don't like things making me feel short. And trust me, that's most things. But a couple more picks of the week this week. First up, Harrower, number 1 from Boom Studios, is written by Justin Jordan and drawn by Graham Revel, whose name I recognize, but I couldn't tell you from what. Justin Jordan is a writer of some repute whose name I haven't seen around much lately. I'm told he's still pretty active on the Facebook, so that's good. He's done a few things over the years, but what I remember him for most is a book called Spread. And I can't remember who drew Spread, but the art was incredible on it also. Spread really was. There was this thing in horror comics, especially in the teens of this century, where a lot of guys had watched The Thing and The Blob. And so a lot of the monsters in comics were like this weird protoplasmic, gross blob, but not and kind of. And yeah, I don't know. It was just kind of like a little leitmotif throughout horror comics, and Spread made the most use of it. Spread was about this giant protoplasmic. They called it the Spread because it was like a massive, like a massive amoeba that would suck people in and living things in, and it was spreading all over the whole world. And so it was like kind of the remaining surviving people were living in a kind of post-apocalyptic sort of mess. And our lead character, whose name was No, he never spoke except to say the word no. And he had a child, the old Mandalorian routine. He was protecting. I mean, that's in a lot of. I wonder where that first came from. You know, the professional and the road. There's a million stories about a strong silent type taking care of lone wolf and cub. I guess would be a pretty good starting point for that in comics, anyway. But that was like I say, that was in the teens. I want to say the spread ended in like 2014 or 15. Yeah, something like that. And then I didn't see really Justin Jordan's name around. I think he also wrote Luther Strode, but I wouldn't swear to it. And that's the sort of thing that I should look up before I start. But I have my other job to do, so I don't have time to fart around. What? Oh, you want me to go on at length about nothing? Okay. So anyway, I don't. This is another horror book. I'm not entirely sure what's going on, but I'm looking forward to it because I haven't read Justin Jordan in a while. Also, this week, this was my pick of the week for the shop, is How I Became a Shoplifter #1. This is written by Tom Brayfogle, whose name I know from something specific, but I've yet to figure it out. I Googled him, And aside from some comic stuff, this is like his first. I want to say this is his first comic, but he's largely known as a musician. And it's possible that I know him from that, but not very because he doesn't play in a punk band that I'm aware of. So I don't know, but I am looking forward to reading this. It's the tagline, as you can say, is the final generation before technology took over, and that was when I the little write up for this for the newsletter. That was kind of the tack I took, is that digital crime has largely replaced physical crime, and while that certainly will cut down on the commute for criminals, it's just not as much fun to read about. And I had, like most people, I had a very brief shoplifting phase. It was largely ceremonial. I had one of my best friends in high school, uh, who has not remained such. He went through a real klepto phase where him and another friend of ours were knocking every Target's dick in El Cajon, California, at least in the CD section. And the only reason I even, because I was not a petty thug until I got out of high school. When I was in high school, I was too deathly afraid of my father to, even fart without permission most of the time. So I was always I never, and I never drank or smoked or did any drugs in high school. It wasn't until I turned 18 that I really went nutty. So this friend of mine, whose name I feel like I shouldn't say, but I don't, how could it possibly matter? He was like, let's go down to Sears and we'll shoplift. I was like, you're out of your fucking mind. I'm not doing anything like that. Are you kidding me? I've seen, on TV, those kids get grounded in a sitcom when they get busted. I at 14 was like, I'm pretty sure that's not how it'll work for me. TV has been lying into my face about this sort of thing all since I've been born. But he goes, no, come on, I'll show you. And he did. So in my hometown shopping mall, Parkway Plaza in El Cajon, California, which is still there, uh, one of the anchor, one of the department stores was Sears, which I think is now a Montgomery Ward's, if you believe that's still around. The mall is still there, but it's collapsing in on itself like most shopping malls in America are. Thanks, digital age is another victim. That's one I don't give a shit about. You can take all the shopping malls you want. I haven't enjoyed a shopping mall since I was in short pants. We went down to the mall, and the Sears had a record section, like a CD area, CDs and cassettes. And so, and it also had a tool section. So Ray takes me over into the tool section, and he steals a pair of needle nose pliers or clippers, some sort of, like, they look like pliers, and that was pretty easy to do. And then we went into the CD section, and we went very loudly, like, "Oh, I'm gonna go ask my mom if she'll buy me this," so that any employees would be like, "Oh, they're just taking it to another department." And then he took me downstairs in the Sears, the basement in the Sears at Parkway Plaza was about what you'd expect. It's like a very weird setup down there. Down in the basement is where they had their photo studio, so you could go take, like, your Christmas photos or whatever. And there was like there was a bunch of clothing being sold down there too, and I think like camping gear and shit like that. And there was an arcade in the very back corner, which is where my mom would often just drop me off at. And they had APB, which I've never seen before or since. Maybe I've seen it one other time. But if anybody's ever played the arcade game APB, it is so much fun. And it makes fun of the police a lot. And I like that too. So, and then there was a couple other just rooms. And this is all like the ins and outs of a shopping mall. I don't know if this was your experience, but I had a very typical suburban experience. I knew every nook and cranny of that mall. I knew that mall better than I knew my own house. Because there were rooms in my house I wasn't allowed in. But the mall, they were like, yeah, go ahead. So in the down there next to the arcade, I want to say, maybe even further back into, in fact, it was like, okay, so there's this room off of another room that it was clearly they were just using it for storage, and they were throwing like furniture and stuff in there. And I'm like, "Where?" I was still super scared. But then he takes me into this room and he shows me in the corner there is a pile of the plastic around the CD that he cut off already that week on his shoplifting rampage. And I saw that and I was like, oh, well, I'm going to go get that Nirvana Incesticide album because I don't want to pay money for it, but I wouldn't mind having it. And so I did. And Ray even went he stole, I want to say, 12 to 15 copies of the Ace of Base single, The Sign. So that should give you, if you were around at all, you're like, oh, okay, I remember when that was. So yeah, it would have been 91, or I think it actually was like 92. And then this other kid, Matt, the other guy that was his partner in crime in this regard, he got busted, I think. And then I think even Ray might have come close to getting busted. And the security guard let him off with a warning and it worked. And I was like, well, I was fine with the one. I stole one thing and I was like, okay, I don't need to do that again, but sure. That's all in here. I'm sure. Sorry. I got sidelined just talking about my own criminal past. Hey man, we were minors. You can't, that's all sealed now. You can't do nothing. So next week I'll tell you about the triple murder we committed. Don't go digging holes in Borrego Springs is all I'm asking. I'm kidding, it was Ramona. So, did I already show this? Okay, good. I just read these moments ago, and so can report on them very succinctly, I should think. First up is Black Tape by Dan Panosian and Dalibor Talajic. Talajic? I don't know his name. It was good. It was about what I expected. We have our main character, Jack King, is like this. This takes place in the early 70s, so he's like a rock god, Jim Morrison type. He dies on stage, as these guys will do. And his wife is dealing with the fallout, the funeral and all the management and his family and all that stuff. And she's very overwhelmed. And then she finds this dark secret uh, pentagram infested room in the basement. And then this is where the story will go from here. This is the thing I've noticed about a lot of image and indie books these days is that the first issues, in the old days, you used to feel a distinct pressure to have your first issue be oversized or just, like it really had to grab the reader. And now it's fine to like kind of take your time with it because most people don't ingest these one issue at a time. They do it in chapters. So basically, it's just chapter one. It doesn't feel a need to really, and that's kind of what we have here. The opposite of which is what we have here. Now, I'm not saying Black Tape isn't good. I'm just saying I can't really say one way or the other until I read at least the second issue. That's been what I've noticed over the last couple of years, that you have to kind of give a book a couple issues or just wait for the fucking trade, which is probably what I should be doing more often. But this was definitely not that. Where Monsters Lie by Kyle Starks and Peter Kowalski. Again, this was exactly what I was expecting, but it then exceeded those expectations by just being really good. For one thing, Kowalski is just an incredible artist. But yeah, it's one of these, and I know I mentioned the premise last week. Is it's basically a gated community for your slashers from your slasher films. So even though they're not using the same names, you have Pennywise here. You've got Michael Myers here. You've got Jason Voorhees here. You've got the fuck was his name? Jigsaw. Like I say, they changed the names to avoid uh, copyright infringement, but they're very clearly meant to represent these characters, and so it seems like such an obvious premise, but nobody's ever done it before. They have this little gated community that they live in when they're not out on their murder sprees. I mean, Starks is a very good writer. I have already, unless did Kyle Starkson write? No, he wrote Rock Candy Man. and Fuck This Place, which I really like also. And yeah, I mean, you can tell from Fuck This Place that Kyle Starks is very well versed in horror, and so like a lot of, and this is the thing too, is slasher movies have long been a kind of niche interest of mine. I haven't. There's a lot of them I haven't seen, but I have seen. Not only have I seen a lot of them, I've written and read extensively. I used to run a blog. It's still out there. I can't imagine anybody would want to read it. Um, it was called Let's Kill Everybody, and it was a monthly. Every month, I would write a new essay about another slasher movie, and I was trying to be very, postmodern and grad school about the whole affair. And then I like recruited other writers that I knew to write. And then I eventually, so that was the slasher movie one. And then I had one, I was just all into exploitation films. So the slasher movie blog was Let's Kill Everybody. I had one about sexploitation movies called Let's Fuck Everybody. I had one about revenge movies called Let's Fight Everybody. And I was thinking stuff like I Spit on Your Grave and stuff like that. I don't even remember if we ever did I Spit on Your Grave. No, we must have. And then one about drinking and drug movies called Let's Drink Everybody. And that was like in 09, 2010. And I did it for about a year. And it just kind of, like every other project that I start with a lot of enthusiasm, and then no one gives a shit. So I just kind of let it fester. Something like this, obviously, is a lot easier for me to do. Um, but yeah, so I went out of my way. Like I went to the library and I checked out every book I could find on slasher movies, which there are more than a couple. It's not. I wasn't just kind of pulling this out of my ass. Well, intellectually perhaps, but yeah. So there's like a lot of vocabulary, and it's not. This book isn't so self-aware, which is nice. That's something else about fiction in general. I find, or metafiction especially. Metafiction, by its own definition, kind of has to be self-aware, but the characters are not, which is a big difference. You know what I mean? So the characters are talking and acting like these sort of archetypal characters that we all know and love. And but yeah, now they're all. It's like taking all your toys and your Star Wars, your GI Joe, etc., and then just putting them all into one sandbox and playing with them. And it's super. It's as fun as it sounds. It's also super violent, and Peter Kowalski is really good at drawing that sort of thing too. So yeah, I'm super stoked on this already. So that'll be it.